Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Tottenham Way podcast, which comes hot on the heels of a fantastic 3-0 win at West Ham. Spurs are back in business after the international break, sitting high in the Premier League table. I have to say that's the most straightforward win I think I can ever recall against West Ham. And I'm glad it was, because in the first half I was going crazy. The disallowed goal for Romero, yet another appalling decision by the officials. We'll come to that in just a moment. I'm Marcus Buckland. Tom Barclay from The Sun, who was at the game, is with me as well. He's just got home. He's eating his food. He's had a little glass of red wine, so he's nice and chilled. And before we get into the details, Tom, just sum up that performance with your bird's eye view.
Yeah, hi, Marcus. Yeah, you say you're going crazy at half time. I think I was falling asleep, to be honest, at half time. I thought that first half was pretty boring, and it was just a matter of when Spurs would make the breakthrough from a corner, which they kept plugging away. And obviously, the second half was a completely different story. Obviously, they did get that breakthrough from the corner, but then there was this frenzy of action inside sort of the first 19 minutes of the second half, where Spurs really ran away from it. And obviously, the red card to Thomas Souček was key. But overall, I think Spurs not only did a job on West Ham in targeting set pieces, and that I believe that's the sixth time already this season West Ham conceded from the set piece, which is a frankly very worrying stat if you're a West Ham fan. Obviously, this podcast has nothing to do with that, but Spurs were obviously right to target it. And before we get into the weeds, I suppose in a week where we've been talking about Ange Postecoglou because he's back at Forest and obviously my book and everything, as much as I like Ange for a lot of reasons, I do feel one of the legitimate criticisms which you regularly had was about set pieces. And whilst I don't really believe he didn't think they were important, it was more just his way of sort of dismissing journalists when they were, bugging him and asking about him. There's no doubt his record at them was underwhelming at best, I suppose. And I think in the age of Premier League now, it's something you just have to give way more sort of attention to. Rightly or wrongly, I do feel personally, as a sort of Premier League observer, some matches are becoming less interesting, and it does seem to be down to who's better at set pieces a lot of the time. Arsenal are the sort of kings of that. But I think you're a fool if you're not making the most of it. And to Thomas Frank's credit, he certainly is already, and that was notable today.
Yeah, it was. And actually, what I enjoyed was the way that Spurs were bombarding the West Ham goal from the corners. And it was, the exact opposite to last season, when, of course, teams worked out that Vicario was struggling just a little bit. So it was very sweet in that regard. And there was so much to enjoy. And the first person I want to talk about is Lucas Bergvall, who completed 89% of his passes. I think I'm right in saying he's become the second youngest Spurs player to score and assist in the Premier League after Nicky Barmby. And Tom, I just love the way he strides around the pitch. He's so emphatic. He's so determined. He's got a very, very shrewd head on his shoulders as well. It was a wonderful header. I mean, this guy is just getting better and better week in, week out, isn't he?
He certainly is. Lucas Bergvall is obviously his first Premier League goal. Famously scored against Liverpool, obviously in the Carabao Cup, but his first Premier League goal. And I personally am still trying to work out, what kind of midfielder Lucas Bergvall is going to be, because he's got so many sort of strings to his bow, so many things he can do. I think when he first came in, we sort of presumed he would become more of a number six. Then remember that interview with the club that James Maddison did last season, where he sort of described him as a lump in a really sort of he meant it in a completely positive sense, in the sense that he's such a powerful player. And then you see him, the way he can dribble with the ball and glide across the pitch, can really set the tone for the team. And now clearly he's got an eye for goal. I mean, that header is a really difficult technique, and I'm not sure we'll come on to the Cristian Romero pass element in a minute, which that was obviously key. But the finish was fantastic. I mean, I asked Thomas Frank about Bergvall afterwards, and that sort of question of what kind of midfielder you see him developing into, because he's still only 19. He could be he could really be anything at this
Mm.
stage. Whatever the club sort of choose to sort of progress him specifically as, I think he would flourish um, as a number 8, a number 6, a number 10. It's just picking that particular position for him. And yeah, I mean, Thomas Frank was obviously effusive praise about him. He talked about the way he can sort of drag the team up with his style, his enthusiasm, his quality. He himself, Frank, pointed out the quality of Romero's pass and the build up to the goal, but he was really impressed with him, and I think everybody was. He was just all round really, really exciting, and I suppose whilst that question of what kind of midfield he's going to be still looms over him from my perspective, having that versatility of being able to play in different sort of midfield roles is exactly right up Frank's street, isn't it? He loves to mix around his tactics, his formations, play players in different positions. And I think having Bergvall and his versatility is something that Frank will really appreciate.
Yeah, I really think that Bergvall is going to become one of Spurs' great players. As you say, he's still only 19. He can do everything. Now, talking about players and positions, Xavi made his debut, and interestingly, afterwards, he did a television interview, and they said to him, "What's your preferred position?" And he said, "Well, growing up, I was always a number 10, and 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 that's what I like. But of course, I've got to be flexible. I've got to be versatile." He started on the left today, and I think that's really important, actually, because for me, that's still a potential area of weakness. He had an assist on his debut. Overall, how do you think he acquitted himself in a Spurs shirt first time out?
I thought he was okay. I've seen sort of other people talking about him having a really, really good debut. I'm not sure I go that far. There were two occasions where one he tried this sort of reverse pass and there was literally no one there, and he almost sort of laughed afterwards because he was like, "Oh, whoops!" And then there was another bit where he sort of ran
Yes.
the ball out of play. But I'm not really sort of hammering for either of them. It was just kind of underlines why it wasn't like an absolutely, mesmerising debut. But one thing that I noticed about him, not including those two incidents, was the calmness he has on the ball. He just seems like someone who isn't going to get flustered when he's in possession. I think that's something that's perhaps, if not lacking from the Tottenham team, because I think someone like Bergvall could get there. Maybe there's a few of the younger players aren't quite at that level yet in possession. And bear in mind, it's his debut. It's in a hostile environment, although I say hostile, West Ham, such a, it really has killed the move to the London Stadium, hasn't it? You're so far away from the
It
pitch
is.
that even, I mean, obviously, it's just such a sterile, terrible atmosphere that plays into the hands of all the opponents, particularly it's a team like a London rival like Spurs. And it doesn't really surprise me that they've been, thrashed essentially by Tottenham and Chelsea in the last two games. But having said that, still, he would have got into it maybe with a bit of nerves or excitement around what he was to expect. And I thought he handled it well. Very nice for him to get an assist, obviously, to sort of kick off the stats, because everyone cares about stats so much these days. Can't say it's going to be an assist that he'll will live long in the memory of his greatest passes, because it was a good corner fired to the back post. But again, from West Ham's
Mm.
perspective, and bear in mind they actually defended the multitude of corners quite well up until that point. I mean, it was so simple. Just fire it to the back post.
Yeah.
Sarr, completely unmarked, had all the time in the world to plant his header, which you got to give him credit. He did exactly what he needed to do. But I do feel like West Ham made it very easy for Spurs. But yeah, encouraging without, I wouldn't go overboard.
Yeah, I'd agree. There were in fact, there were one or two people going, "Oh, I'm underwhelmed," and there were, as you rightly say, one or two go, "Oh, this is amazing," and it wasn't amazing. And I think he did grow into it. And listen, it's his first appearance, so yeah, a very nice, steady start. And again, you're absolutely right. Once Spurs scored that first goal, the lack of backbone in that West Ham side was shocking, and it was no surprise when one became two with the header from Bergvall, and then two became three with Van der Ven is becoming a prolific goal scorer as well as being an incredible defender. All eyes were also on Tell, who was given the central striking role today. Now, I saw one stat that suggested he only had 7 touches. And I don't want to start hammering Tell because I think he shows nice little, flicks of ability. And again, he played well on the international stage during the week. But I think there's a danger, that if he doesn't start doing something significant soon, he is going to get the boo boys on his back. So
You
what
think?
did you make of his performance today? The fact that he's looking to bounce back, of course, as well, having been left out of the Champions League squad.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about the boo boys. Is that you think some Spurs fans are starting to be like, come on, it's about time you showed something? Is that what you're saying from his? From...
I think, yeah, I think people are looking at what Spurs paid for him, what he has delivered so far, which has been a little bit underwhelming. Although even last season I saw some touches, but I think there are those waiting to pounce, Tom, if it doesn't work and say, well, that was a waste of money, and you could have cobbled together a bit more cash and come up with somebody better. I don't want to be that sort of person. I think there are those poised to be that sort of
Right.
person.
That's interesting. I mean, I suppose with the way performances and results are going at the moment, barring the Bournemouth um, result and performance, I don't think there's going to be too much negativity generally. But I have to say, I was first of all surprised to see Tell start, given the week he's had. Obviously been left out of the Champions League squad. But Frank was very effusive with praise about his reaction, Tell's reaction to being left out of that squad and being disappointed. In Friday's press conference, he said it was a very difficult decision and a very unfair decision, and he praised Tell for how he sort of handled it. And obviously because Richarlison has been playing for Brazil. I forget the game. I think he mentioned Ecuador. I haven't actually Googled it, but he was talking about Richie playing in sort of 4,000 meters, above sea level. So I presume it was Ecuador. Unless that was Benfica, I'm not sure actually. But either way, basically,
No,
so
you're
just
right.
come
It
back.
was Rich.
Okay,
It was Richarlison. Yeah.
and that was part of the reason why to leave him, to start him on the bench, and with Solanke having this situation with his ankle, being out of this game at least. We'll wait to find out how long that lasts. And Moani being so far off it fitness wise, hadn't played for ages. I guess it was always going to be Tell. I just like Dan, dearly departed Dan last season. I remember doing the Ipswich pod when Tell played. It's just like, it just doesn't look like a centre forward in the Premier League yet. And I think there are question marks, whether he ever will be because of his physical presence. But he's only 20. But right now he seems way off being able to play in that position personally for a team like Tottenham. Thomas Frank talked about him afterwards. He sort of singled him out, even when I don't think anyone actually brought him up. He talked about it being a 7 out of 10 performance from his perspective. He did say, I forget the phrase, but it was something like, it wasn't like a wow performance or blow the roof off or something like that. But he sort of appreciated his pressing, the work rate he puts in. And I think you'll always get that from Matisse Tell. He's clearly, Harry Kane's talked about how his work rate before he actually signed for Spurs. He's clearly got the right attitude. But that position is hard. It's hard for a lot of strikers. Michael, you saw that interview with Michael Owen over the international break with Rio Ferdinand. He was sort of, lamenting the lack of centre forwards that are around these days compared to his days. And I just so even for what we just consider to be some of the best centre forwards at the moment, there aren't that many of them. I'm not convinced it is for Tell was going to be one of those. And if he is, even though he played today, I do wonder if a loan move would be the right thing for him if his game time ends up being limited. But Spurs won, so let's not. It's not like he did badly. He just felt like he wasn't really involved that
You're absolutely right. It's not his natural position, and we may need him to play up front on occasions this season. I can see him having a decent run in the Carabao Cup and maybe getting some confidence against the likes of Doncaster. But yeah, you're right. Let's not dwell on too many negatives. And I think there's a really good player there. Talking of really good players, and the only thing that was missing, well, just about the only thing that was missing today was a goal for Kudus against his former club, because they were booing him, weren't they? The Hammers fans, while they were still inside the ground, my God, they'd all gone home after about 63 minutes, hadn't they? But by then he'd shut them up. I mean, he's such a live wire. I just wanted him to get a goal, and he did come very close. Actually, the keeper made one excellent save to deny him. But
he
what a
did.
fabulous Tottenham type player he is, Tom.
Yeah, I just think he's a very good signing. He offers something different to what the other wide players at Spurs have. I've been talking about this since he signed, since pre-season. It's obviously his dribbling ability, but his power to sort of keep hold of the ball and allow his teammates to sort of get out and get up the pitch and sort of give them a breather in a sense after being pressed by the other team, and obviously his skill. We saw that quite a few times where he'd sort of do a step over or something and get round down the outside. It's no coincidence he does it a lot. He's a very good player. Yeah, it'd be nice to see. I mean, he is still yet to score, isn't he, for Spurs so far? So
Correct. Couple of
I'm sure
assists
it's
early on. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure it's coming. But when you watch him, you think this is a player that could score double figures in the Premier League if things start to click, even though he hasn't really done that much before. I think he might have done that in the first season at West Ham, but I think he's got the attributes for it. And it was interesting, again, in the press conference ahead of the game, one of the questions was about Kudus and the Brian and Mbeumo situation at Brentford and the way Frank sort of developed him into a 20-goal a season or last season wide forward. I don't quite see them being the same kind of player. I think Mbeumo is much more of a sort of goal scorer, but there is something that he can take, I think, from that, and it'll be interesting to see how Frank develops him in terms of his goal return. But yeah, even if he doesn't score, it's he. I suppose in a different way to like Sonny last year when he wasn't scoring, he was being not anonymous, but wasn't really bringing that much to the table. In that final season, it's not like he was like that years before when he didn't score. He'd do a lot of good things, but I feel like Kudus has so many strengths that he does a lot for the team, not just from work rate, but just his quality and keeping hold of the ball. That means even if he doesn't score, it's still a valuable asset.
Yeah, he's a constant threat. Absolutely. He's no, I think he's a fantastic signing at £55 million. Now, you touched briefly on the role of Romero in the goal for Bergvall, and I read a couple of people today saying that they think he's the best ball-playing central defender in the Premier League. I'm not sure if that is quite the case, but he's right up there. His distribution, Tom, and we talk about new signings, and of course, we're all excited about the new players. But the fact that he signed a new contract, and I'm still intrigued by what you were saying a couple of podcasts ago. Did he deep down, did he know that Daniel Levy was going? Well, whatever the reason, he signed a new contract. He is obviously a fantastic defender. We know he's got the discipline now. And the way he passes the ball so crisply, I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, it was a wonderful assist for Bergvall today.
Yeah, he's top class. He's so good. I mean, back when last season, and I was sort of suggesting that the Spurs, they got an offer that they deemed acceptable, they should cash in. The argument was never about his quality; it was about his commitment, whether he really, whether he wanted to be there, and his contractual situation. But if you've managed to convince him, like Tottenham have, not only to keep him, but to make him get him to sign a new contract, and he's obviously captain, then he's an unbelievable player. I guess the other question must be about his fitness. So that's going to be something that we'll have to see how Spurs manage him throughout the season. But I suppose, look at Richarlison today. That is an indication that Thomas Frank is going to be willing to make certain calls about players' fitness, even when it might be detrimental to the team. Because you think going into this game, okay, probably wants to give Richie a rest, but look, there's no Solanke. Mwani's not up to it. He's going to have to play him, but he chose not to. And he played with a striker who's obviously, as we've just pointed out, struggling to sort of show that he's good enough at this level, and yet they still won 3-0 anyway. So hopefully that stands Tottenham in good stead over, the load management, as we call it now for players under Thomas Frank. But yeah, Romero, unbelievable ball. Talk about Daniel Levy. It was obviously the first game of the new era under the younger generation of Enoch and Viv Lewis.
Viv, she was there. Good old Viv.
Viv was there, as was her son-in-law Nick Kucher, if I pronounced that right, and next to Vinay and Johan Lange up in the stands. And they will have looked down and thought, "Wow, we've definitely. It looks like we've got our money's worth over this new contract for a World Cup winning centre back."
Yeah, absolutely. I was really pleased to see Destiny Doggy come on, but I find this a fascinating discussion, and going through social media after the game today, and I disagree with this, but I saw a few people saying, Jed Spence, we love him, and he's now an England international as well. One of the people was saying, he's fine defensively, but he's not quite good enough when he's going forward, and therefore they want Udogie to come back in. I'm not so sure, but again, I just think it's great that we've got the options, and we've also got the ability to switch Spence over to the right side if anything happens to Porro as well. I mean, if I was to nail your colours to the mast, Tom, biggest game of the season, Spurs get through to a Champions League semi-final. Who are you starting in that left back position, assuming they're both fit?
I think I'm going Udogie, but I'm starting to become to waver on that a little bit just because of Spencer's development. I think more than anything, I just like the balance of having a natural left footer in that position. And he's such an athlete, and he's just a really good player, Destiny Udogie. I think people he's obviously got this slightly, to be honest, a bit of a questionable injury record now at this point. But when he came back towards the end of the European campaign, I do think he had a huge impact. Maybe slightly overlooked how big an impact he had in Spurs going all the way in the Europa League. So I do really like him. But Spence has just fantastic improvement, and I think his quality going forward is really good. It's just he's not a natural left footer, so there will be occasions where he'll want to cut inside, or if he tries to go down the left and try and put in a cross with his left, he's not a natural foot. It's harder, and Udogie is a good crosser of the ball too. He's not just natural there. He's got good delivery on him too. But I think the point that you made about options, Thomas Frank, more than any manager, it seems, is a proper horses for courses kind of manager. And now he's got so many different players in so many different positions that can play so many different positions that he must, from a sort of tactical preparation point of view, he must be loving.
Yeah, I mean the strength in depth, the options, absolutely. It makes such a change. And you like to think that we're not hopefully going to have the same sort of injury problems as the last couple of years. We've got to remind ourselves that Kudusevski's going to come back at some point as well. We get Solanke fit. I want Bentancur to sign a new deal as well. Some rumours that he might be going, but I mean, in key games, he's got such a big role to play. But yeah, there are some options. Maybe that central striking role could be an issue, and you worry maybe if Romero gets hurt as well. But come January, Viv can cement her newfound love with the fans by signing a couple more players with that money that's swirling around behind the scenes now.
Well, I think it will be fascinating to see what they do, because if they are as in tune with the fan base's feelings as they seem to claim to be, they'll be aware that that's been one of the main bones of contention is the investment or lack of. And January has been a time where, admittedly, most clubs don't do as much business, but Tottenham generally, obviously move for loans most of the time. So if they go for a different approach this January, that really will be a statement of intent and commitment going forward. What did I want to say? Oh, Bentancur. That was one of the questions actually afterwards, was about rotation and the sort of, with Villarreal looming, which I think we'll come on to in a second. Frank was seemed to be quite pleased with how he's been able to mix it up and give Bentancur a rest, obviously having had his international duty exertion. So he seems very much still, Bentancur, a big, huge part, and I wouldn't be surprised if Frank was playing a final right now. I'm pretty sure Bentancur would be in that starting 11. So I think, but it's also good to see that Spurs can win without him as well. Very good all round. And I know one other topic, which I don't think we've gone to, maybe you were about to bring it onto in a second, was what felt like at the time an absolutely massive controversial
Yes.
flashpoint, which proved to be
Yes.
not irrelevant, but it wasn't as big a news story because Spurs came through the game. But I mean, do you want to explain and give us your
Yeah,
rant
well,
on
I,
that?
I
Really?
will, but because I didn't want to go with it straight away, and you're right. In the end, it didn't really matter. But I was fuming in the first half, and Spurs are the latest team to be victims of just appalling decision making. I mean, the disallowed Romero goal. It's an absolute joke. I must have seen 25 different angles, and they're saying that there was a two-handed foul by him. No, he's being pushed from behind. He's sort of tripping into the player in front. That was a goal every single time. And just to compound the error, then a few minutes later, Fernandez clearly thinks he's playing rugby, not football. He's tugging Van der Ven all over the place. That should have been a penalty. And I'm sorry, I know they are now trying to back the referee's decision on the pitch. But if he's making a really bad one, for God's sake, VAR, get involved. But Tom, this is becoming a joke. I mean, if you're a Fulham fan this season, you know what I mean. What's going on? It's just unacceptable. It really is. And on another day, we might have conceded, having not had a perfectly good goal given to us, and the whole afternoon spiraled out of control. Something's got to be done. When is something going to be done, Tom? Because it's a joke, week in, week out.
Well, I agree, and worryingly, from the PGMOL's perspective, it was one thing having Marcus Buckland on a Tottenham podcast ranting and raving, albeit
Yeah.
arguably the
Oh, they'll ignore
fans,
me.
but the fans' feelings about this are essentially to be honest, what matters most. But obviously, something that probably easier to ignore. But I was just looking up. That's why I've been looking at my phone. I want to call up James Maddison's tweet off the back of what happens. I don't know if you've seen this. He tweeted afterwards saying,
Yes.
honestly, the referees and VAR have had an absolute shock over the start of the season. If that goal is disallowed for a foul, you will never ever see a corner be taken without referee blowing for something ever again. And it's like, if the players are starting to call out, these decisions, that does start to exert some pressure. But I can understand it. I mean, just looking at that decision, you're absolutely right. You nail on the head is this obsession now with backing the referee's call. And I do get to a certain extent where that comes from. Having to sort of not try and undermine the on-field referee to the point where they become almost pointless, because any time decision they make just gets completely taken away from it and dealt with at Stockley Park. But over situations like that, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then with the Van der Ven one, with the penalty, it just often feels like if a player is small going up against a physically bigger player, they just get the sort of benefit of the doubt. It's like, no, the guy's not even looking at the ball, and
Yeah.
he's trying to
No.
pull him down. So I
No.
mean, Frank was asked about it after.
Oh,
I was going to say Frank was asked about it afterwards, and he said, look, that's definitely a goal. Don't understand that at all for the first one. And then he was saying with the Van der Ven one, he said, well, 60-40 for me, it should be a penalty, but he sort of admitted a bit of bias. But let's be honest. I mean, Spurs won 3-0, so it doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter, but there's no point in Frank, going off on one.
It didn't matter.
They won the game.
Tom, the thing is, it didn't matter this week, but another week it will, and that's why it's just got to be. I don't know how they're going to sort it out, but it's just every single week. There's going to be an absolute shambolic moment. By the way, with regards to Thomas Frank, interesting little stat. He's only the third Tottenham manager at the top level to win his first 2 away games. And the only caveat to not getting too excited about that is that the other 2 were Osvaldo Ardiles and Tim Sherwood. And actually, they didn't go on to last too long at the club, but hopefully that is not going to be the case. Now, it is a quick turnaround, and it was perfect, the fact that he was able to make lots of substitutions towards the end, with Villarreal coming up on Tuesday night. Interestingly, they lost tonight 2-0 at Atletico Madrid. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that's their first league defeat of the season in Spain. Now, Juan Foyth started for them. Thomas Partey is in the team. Manor Solomon was on the bench for them, and I checked this with you beforehand, but he can play against us in the Champions League. I was speaking to my friend Rob Palmer, who's a bit of a Liga expert. He says they're very well organised. They are not to be underestimated, but it's going to be a big night Tuesday night, and I think at least we can go into the game, hopefully, with a really strong squad to choose from, and an opportunity to use that stadium for what it was built for. Big European night.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were plenty of occasions last season where the classic 12th man of the fans in the stand made a big difference. I mean, the sort of standout one was the Bodo home game, I think it was. Yeah, where Brennan Johnson scored in like the first minute. And the players afterwards talked about, in the sort of video that Spurs released, about the journey of the Europa League. They pinpointed that. They talked about the sort of hair standing on the back of their necks going into that game. They could feel the atmosphere, and they just buzzed off it, and it really worked. And it was not a foregone conclusion that was going to be the situation, but given how badly things were going in the league. So it was real credit to the Spurs fans for creating such an atmosphere like that, and Spurs rode the wave to get there. And I think they might need to do it against Villarreal, because what we've seen so far from Thomas Frank's team is they clearly can beat anyone, but a lot of the time it's kind of modern day football, isn't it? These chess matches now is what they turn into, and at times it can frustrate
Mm.
me. That's just football in general, in the way that it seems to have the sort of thrill factor isn't as much maybe as it was, or maybe it's just the start of the season. We get this stop-start period where the international break comes in, and that could be part of it too. But Villarreal, I can't claim to know loads about them beyond the squad list, but as you pointed out, it sounds like they're a pretty organised team. So you wouldn't be surprised if it was a relatively cagey fixture, and similar to what maybe we've seen in other games this season.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I really liked listening to Thomas Frank before the game today, he was, he owned what happened against Bournemouth. That was a terrible performance. He says, I've watched it back and it was even worse second time around. But I'm just going to be fascinated to see tactically what he does in these Champions League matches, because he has got the options. And with that, big, passionate crowd, I think Spurs have got every chance to get off to a good start. And you want to do that. We were saying that a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, you've got more games in this new format, but the sooner you can get yourself into a good position, as actually Spurs did in the Europa League last season, the more you can take a little bit of pressure off yourself as the fixtures start to pile up. I've got one question I want you to ask, and I know you guys are in a privileged position, and this is a small point, but I noticed it again today. Actually, Bergvall, of all people, was guilty of a foul throw. And it has
Yes.
happened, and I can't remember whether it was Bournemouth or Burnley, where it happened 2 or 3 times. Now, this is a basic, but actually, when Bergvall did it today, we lost possession in a good part of the pitch. And I'm sorry, Tom, but at this level, there is no excuse for a foul throw. Can you have a word with Mr. Frank and make sure they iron out that small little deficiency, please?
Well, I mean, it winds me up massively too, and it feels like generally, it feels like the biggest, one of the biggest differences between Sunday League football and Premier League and top level football, well, obviously apart from the quality, is you really have to do a really, really bad foul throw for it to get called out in professional level. Whereas, at least in my experience in Sunday League, you get called out for a foul throw all the time. But this one
Yeah.
was dreadful. And Bergvall gave the sort of shrug of the shoulders, what me ref, but clearly it definitely should have been one. And I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest, given that Thomas Frank is a man of details, particularly over situations like long throws and like and set pieces and kickoffs and all that stuff. That might bother him more than your average manager. Maybe he wouldn't admit that publicly, but maybe he would, and that might even lead to a genuinely interesting question, not just a sort of just to ask one of your questions because it's been bothering you. Because he, like I say, he's a man of the fine margins and those kind of things. I think he notices that they all accumulate into something quite significant.
I will be listening very carefully to the next press conference, Tom, and I'll be disappointed if you do not pose that question to Mr. Frank. Now, obviously, 3 goals, 3 points. I came up with 3 predictions afterwards, and one of these in particular, our man George is not going to be happy. But off the back of that win today, I'm afraid to say I don't think that Graham Potter's going to make it beyond the October international break if he even gets that far. I think West Ham are going to go down, by the way. This is the worst West Ham side that I have seen. And my third prediction, and again, it's not directly now involved with Spurs, but Ange obviously had his first game for Nottingham Forest. They lost 3-0 at Arsenal. I don't think he's making it to the end of the season at the City Ground. 3 predictions. What do you reckon?
I just feel like you're baiting the few Aussie fans we still had on here, who probably have left us by now when they've heard that comment.
Yes.
I mean, it's funny. I saw a tweet after there was a comment from Ange about is it Milenkovic? I think the centre back, or maybe Murillo. One of them's got injured, and
Yeah.
he said it's a knock.
Yes, he has.
Spurs fans were like, "Do the Forest fans know that this is how it starts?" Although I would say, to be fair, Thomas Frank has been saying Solanke is going to keep going back every week for the last few weeks, and he's still not back fit. So he's Ange's not definitely the only one.
That's
I
true.
don't know. I mean, Ange himself he even said after the game, he was asked about sort of how long term projects and getting his methods across. Is it going to take a while? And he said he basically played that down massively and said, "No, I've got to get it done now." So I think he's aware that with the owner that he has, that he needs to have a quick impact, and the fact that Forest were in a
He
really
does.
good position. it's quite a rare job, isn't it, to come in. Basically, they're doing really well, but they've decided to get rid of the guy anyway and go a different direction.
Yeah.
It doesn't often
Yeah.
happen. Normally, you come in after a manager's left because they've got, been lured by another club or because it's going disastrously. Like, it feels like it's going with West Ham with Graham Potter, to be honest. I agree.
Yeah.
I do think they've got some. I do think they still have some quality players. I think Paquetá, if he put away that chance, their one chance early doors, from actually quite a nice flowing move, then maybe it could have been a different story today. But yeah, I don't know. I do worry for West Ham. So obviously, so I don't
Oh, I
think that.
don't.
I don't think they're
I
outlanding.
never worry for West Ham. I'm just
But I saw.
delighted. I mean,
I was going to say I saw a statistic that this was the biggest win Spurs have had at West Ham since 1962. So that must be music to your ears, Mark.
it most certainly is. Obviously we've got bigger fish to fry, but they hate us. They make it very clear. So, yeah, that was that was very sweet today. I think that's almost it. There was one other thing. Oh, what was I going? Oh, yeah, just on the subject of Postecoglou again, and of course, if just for some reason somebody has not bought your book yet, the brilliant book that you've just come up with, Miracle in Bilbao, Ange did say in his first press conference as Forest manager that he knew what was coming in terms of his long-term situation at Tottenham before the Europa League final, and yet, of course, they win it, and then they go to the big sort of triumph a couple of days later, and he's talking about season 3. So that doesn't. I mean, can you sort of make that a bit clearer? Because if he knew what was coming, why was he talking about season 3 unless he was just trying to force Daniel Levy's hand at that stage?
I'm sort of smiling because I don't really want to go into this too much because I want people to read the book. Because I feel like they might. When he said that, I was like, that's interesting because there might be something in the book that I on when I believe he thought he was in trouble, put it that way, at some point. So I'd say go and read the book, but and also I think I've
Okay.
got some insights having spoken to people about that speech is also in the book over what he may have considered saying that he didn't. So yeah, go and have a read, I would say.
Mm.
But
Mm.
finally,
Oh.
to sort of swiftly move on from that, I just wanted to say, as always, we're very very thankful for the multitude of emails we've been having coming in. Our friend from South Korea that we mentioned last time has actually got in touch with me personally as well to offer up to translate my book, which is super kind, and I obviously would love to happen, albeit it sounds like from the publisher's perspective we have to get a publisher to do that, so it's not quite simple. But first of all, thank you very much for the offer. But anyone who wants to get in touch,
Talking
make
of
any
him, actually, by
points
the way, are we still only
to
his?
us that you think we
I was
so
just going to
I
say,
was just
sorry,
going to
because
say
our
anyone who
line's a bit
wants.
crackly here, Tom. But I was just going to. Yeah, go on. Hang on. Let's pause this and start that bit again.
Should I go? Sorry, guys. There's a bit of a connection issue with Marcus's Wi-Fi or mine. I was just going to say, let me finish this point, Marcus. So, first of all, thank you very much to Jahan who got in touch about that particular situation. But anyone who wants to get in touch and suggest any topics that you think we should discuss in future podcasts, anything that's bothering you about Spurs or something you really want to, sort of point out that we haven't been talking about in a really good way, and I'm sure there's lots of that at the moment, Thomas Frank. And please email us at the Tottenham Way Pod at gmail.com. We're also on X at the Tottenham Way. We're on Instagram as well at the Tottenham Way Pod. And of course, we are now on YouTube, where you're watching this back, you'll see this back and forth between myself and Marcus being out of sync and having to cut each other off. But it's at the Tottenham Way Pod on YouTube. You can watch us there, and please leave your comments. We love the engagement. Like I said before, we're trying to create a bit of a community feel about Spurs on over there. So let us know. Cheers, guys.
Yeah. No, sorry, I keep interrupting. We have got a bad line, but I was just going to say to you, are we still only the South Korean fans' second favourite podcast, and have we found out which his favourite one is?
Good question. I'm still yet to respond to his last one, so maybe I'll bring it up in that one. He did say actually in his last email he seemed to be worried about our lack of time, or whether we got a day off in the week if we're always working weekends. And I said, no, don't worry, we do. And also, please don't feel bad for us because we get to go and watch football for a living. So it's a pretty privileged position.
It is. All right. Well, listen, Tom. Before I cut into you again, we'll leave it there. But thank you very much indeed. And we're not just here to flog Tom's book, but I'm now 3/4 of the way through it, and it is a good read. And it sounds as though there are a few little snippets of gold in terms of what Ange was thinking and what he was knowing towards the end of last season. So do go and grab hold of a copy of that. We will be back after the Villarreal game on Tuesday night as Tottenham get their Champions League campaign underway again. Thanks to Tom Barclay from The Sun. I am Marcus Buckland. We have conceded just one goal in our first 4 games. We've won 3 of them. We are flying high. This is going to be quite a season. I can sense it and feel it in my old bones. Come on, you Spurs.